The Tudors and Stuarts. So we're talking from 1487 to 1714. There was a significant change from medieval to modern English, including the church. So 1525, William Tyndale printed the New Testament in English, and it was a bestseller, and it was the foundation for other English Bibles. Henry VIII decreed that English Bibles should now be in every church, and also we had a prayer book also to be in English, and the Bible must be secured in church, chained or whatever, because otherwise it'll get nicked, so it had to be chained. So we're now getting English in the church for the first time. How many people do you think turned up to hear Collett read the New Testament in the old St Paul's Cathedral in London? How many people do you think turned up to hear the New Testament being read in English? We'll say thousands, so give us a number. 10. You can multiply that by 4. 40,000 people turned up. 20,000 people in the old St Paul's and 20,000 people outside because they couldn't get in there, right? And there was crowd control, right? So 40,000 people had turned up to hear English being spoken in St Paul's Cathedral. The Common Book of Prayer, that was Book of Common Prayer, that was also in English by law. And during Elizabeth's reign, the Revised Great Bible was published, and there were nearly 20 publication reprints. Now, Henry VIII, him and William Tyndale, they were good buddies, and then they fell out. And William Tyndale came out with the idea of the divine right of kings, because he'd proved that in his Bible, and Henry VIII cottoned on to that. But then there was a bit of a dispute between them, and Tyndale had to go over to the continent. But Henry VIII put his mark on him, and eventually he was caught and executed. Right, I know, it was terrible. But Henry VIII had become defender of the faith, and he felt, and he had a bust up with the Pope, excommunicated, and he thought, right, I'm going to do things now to show that I'm in charge of this church in England. Hence him making decisions about the Bible being in English and the prayer book being English. Elizabeth followed that with the Great Bible, and then there was a very, very big step forward when James I came on. He then got 50 scholars from London University, or the equivalent of a university in London, Cambridge and Oxford universities, and got them to go down to the original texts and retranslate, not the Vulgate, but going back to original Latin, original Arabic and everything else, Hebrew, the like, and retranslated it. And what it did, it proved 95% that Tyndale did on his own was right. Yes, I know. We have taken many, many phrases from the Bible. A lot of people don't realise that we have, but we have. A broken heart. Wrong side. A broken heart, a cross to bear, labour of love, thorn in the flesh, a two-edged sword, eye to eye, a fall from grace, sour grapes, fat of the land, wit's end. Yes, all from the Bible, and there are lots and lots more. There really are. And during this Renaissance period, Italy was the centre of the world. It was the centre of art. It was the centre of music. It was the centre of exploration. It was everything you can imagine. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. It was the centre of the world. We took lots of roughly 10 to 11,000 words from the Italians into our English language. Mainly Latin based, but a lot of them were Arabic based, and a lot were Greek based. Words into the English language. And words like, so these are Latin and Italian words. I can only just give you a few. I'm not going to go into thousands. Absurdity, agile, apparatus, area, balcony. And some of the Greek words. Well, in the book that I mentioned, there is a cartoon by Barry Appleby, and you've got the town crier, and he's saying, Come and see Academy of Drama, exotic paradox, heroic comedy ending in tragedy and catastrophic climax. And these two English people are looking at one another, lady and her husband. What do some of these new words mean? He said, I don't know. It's all Greek to me. Yes. Yeah. Shakespeare, right? He centred a lot of his plays in Italy. Romeo and Juliet, Merchant of Venice, Two Men of Verona, and, well, quite a number, right? So did all the other writers. And they themselves added thousands of words to the English vocabulary. They were called inkhorn words, because you didn't have an inkwell, you had a horn, right, with ink in, and they inkhorn where they got the ink from, and they were making words up. Shakespeare made up roughly 1,700 words. But some of the words he made up, he adopted words from the continent and also changed some perhaps dialect words into his own English words. Milton, in fact, made up more words, original words, than what Shakespeare did. And there was a great controversy at the time, much like today, about the young people making up words and which will we accept A as a word or anything. So, luckily enough, the two arguments were, should we accept these new words and enrich the English language, or should we keep English as it's English? And the inkhorn words came through, and it did enhance the English language. I've got some words that Shakespeare made up, just a few. Bedroom, manager, hot-blooded. I should have said that after bedroom, I think, but fortune teller, ladybird, love letter, marriage bed, puppy dog, schoolboy, zany, barefaced. These are words that Shakespeare made up, are now in everyday language. They really are. There's quite a few that didn't quite make it, but we also know from the way he wrote, because he wrote in a dialect, and where it was performed it was done in dialect, right? So we know it was written phonetically, so we know how it was said. So we know in Shakespeare's time it was film. I'm not talking about a film that you go to the cinema to see. I'm talking about a thin film of dust, because it spelt it P-H-I-L-O-M-E, film. So we know how it was spelt, pronounced. And when I was on the dig, one of my favourite bits, we'd worked all day from 6 o'clock in the morning on set, and we started at 8 filming, and we finished at 8 o'clock at night, and we achieved 6 lines. Oh, I know, there were so many takes from various angles, and then on a railway line, then on a drone and everything else like that. And the actors were just going to revolt at the end. You could see it all building up. And then Ray finds this something rather special. He stood and he did To Be or Not to Be in a Suffolk accent. Oh, it wasn't funny at all, right? It wasn't to be or not to be. That was to be or not to be. That's the question, whether that's noble in the mind. And he held them. And at the end he said, I have been Hamlet, I've been every other part in Hamlet, I've even directed it. And then you get Shakespeare company, but he said, but doing it in a Suffolk accent, it was a different rhythm to what we've ever learned. And the pauses were in a different place. He said, but it taken Shakespeare to a higher level than I've ever known before. And all these other actors, I mean, some really famous ones, international ones, one was crying because it was so powerful. He said, you brought it alive. He then said, because if you are now, I've got 80 people in front of me, and actors, directors, producers and the like, and he said, of course, if you ask Charlie, he'll tell you, you know, especially if you get his book, he was a fantastic salesman, and he said Shakespeare wrote in a dialect, and wherever Shakespeare was performed, it was done in dialect. Is that not right, Charlie? I went, yeah. He said, so therefore, how would Shakespeare have sounded like in the West Country? I went, pardon? He said, what would Shakespeare have sounded like in the West Country? So straight away I went like this. My horse, my kingdom for horse. And then he said to me, so what would Shakespeare have sounded like in Birmingham? I went, where? He said, Birmingham. Well, I'd worked with him long enough, I know what he wanted me to do. So straight away I went, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Well, that's what they all did. And it all brought it down to a lovely... He said, cheerio together, see you in the morning. That was a lovely little quote, it really, really was. So this is Shakespeare. Now, what has happened Standard English has come in and has put a different meaning to this particular quote from As You Like It. I'll give you today, right? It is 10 o'clock, thus we may see, quoth he, how the world wags. 'Tis but 1 hour ago since it was 9, and after 1 hour more 'twill be 11. And so from hour to hour we ripe and ripe, and then from hour to hour we rot and rot, and thereby hangs a tale. Not one of you smiled, let alone laughed. That is the bawdiest line in Shakespeare. Because I did it in standard English, you didn't understand it. The Globe would have been on the floor crying with laughter. So, first thing we got to remember is the rhotic R are still being pronounced in that time there. So they're in the middle, right? We've got to remember that all Shakespeare's sonnets, poems rhymed. They don't today, right? He went forth for all his worth, and it was lofter and dofter for laughter and daughter, and it was loft and proft for loved and proved, and it was haired and beard for heard and beard, right? So now, because of standard English, we have changed some of the pronunciations. So it would have been mine, yours, ours. Not mine, yours, ours. It'd be mine, yours, ours. Now the H has dropped off the beginning of all words. So the hours of the day have now become not hours, it's still oars. It's the oars of the day. And the ladies of ill repute are now also called oars. I think you're getting the gist of this now, right? So Shakespeare's comedies were exaggerated beyond belief. They were the pantomime of the day. When you look at A Midsummer Night's Dream with all the makeup and everything else and the people dressing up, it is the pantomime of the day, and it's grossly exaggerated to be funny. Well, so was this. So in Shakespearean English, this would be, it is 10 o'clock, thus we may see, quoth he, how the world wags. 'Tis but 1 hour ago since it was 9, and after 1 hour more 'twill be 11. And so from hour to hour we ripe and ripe, and then from hour to hour we rot and rot, and thereby hangs the tale. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right. So you can see exploration and trade. Right, we're now starting to go over the world. We go to the Americas. Right, and now we're setting up over there. And we've taken words from the Native Americans. We then start trading over in the East, right, looking for the spice trade. So there we are, and we're going over, and we're trying to put a flag everywhere we go. We really are. And some of the words through trade, commerce, privateering, because privacy, sort of piracy really, but privateering and exploration. From Arabic, we get admiral, alchemy, alcohol, arsenal, hazard, jar, loot, saffron, syrup. From the Portuguese, we get anchovy, breeze. From the Spanish, bravado, barricade. From Persia, bazaar, caravan, chest, tambourine. From Malay, we get bamboo. And from the Dutch, right, we've traded with the Dutch, we've had wars with the Dutch, right? We've taken lots of words from the Dutch. Avast, blink, coldslaw, easel, gherkin, landscape, mumps. Yeah, I know. The Dutch gave us the mumps. Got to blame them for that. Poppycock, and I'm not talking poppycock, they gave us the poppycock. Bumpkin, napkin, or knapsack, although it's pronounced knapsack. Measles, they gave us the measles as well. And crap. No, I'm not talking it, they gave us that word as well. And lots more, lots more. So we've got this call for a standard. We really have. And it's difficult to see why it didn't happen, but then very easy to see why it did. Lord Stanhope in 1754, I cannot help thinking it is a sort of disgrace to our nation that hitherto we have no standard of our language. Our dictionaries at present being more properly than what our neighbours, the Dutch and Germans, call word books, rather than dictionaries in the superior sense of that title. So therefore, we're calling for a standard. Queen Anne called for a standard. Daniel Defoe, they were all calling for a standard. Queen Anne dies and it just petered out. It really did. And we're now coming into the Victorian era, really, the Georgians and the Victorian era. And up till now, many books on grammar, many books on dictionaries, loads, but never ever been accepted as standard. Never been accepted. And there was really lots and lots of contradiction. And a standard was necessary because we were writing phonetically, and the language was a bit messed up, and we started transposing figures and all sorts of things. We really, really did. And it made it very, very difficult. Like I explained before with the H and the W, right? We transpose, and we did it with M's and N's. We still do today. That's a lady's handbag, but we say handbag. We swap the M's and N's, and it's a sandwich, not a sandwich. And it's a bonfire, not a bonfire. So we've swapped words, letters around through history, we really, really have. And these words that we're now starting to take from around the world, from everywhere. So I've got some here. From India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Bandana, bungalow, catamaran, cheroot, chutney, curry, cushy, dungarees, gymkhana, jodhpurs, juggernaut, jungle, khaki, shampoo, pyjamas. Right, then from Africa, including Egypt and South Africa, aardvark, banjo, ebony, jumbo, oasis, obelisk, pharaoh, pyramid, safari, trek, zombie. And from Australia, New Zealand and Polynesia, budgerigar, boomerang, didgeridoo, dingo, haka, kangaroo, kiora, koala, tattoo. Tattoo, that's the skin markings, right? The tattoo that we get from a military tattoo, we get that from the Dutch. Because the Dutch soldiers, when they finished a shift, they'd go in the pub and they'd be drinking away, and then the guard would come along from the garrison with their drum and with their pipes and what have you, and then would shout out to the do tap toe, right? That was turn off the taps, and then they'd march them back to the garrison playing their drums, their pipes and then what have you, and that's how we get military tattoo. We still haven't got a standard yet. And then three people came to the fore: Samuel Johnson, Robert Louth and Thomas Sheridan. Samuel Johnson's dictionary in 1755, it was a bestseller. It was 1'6" tall, 1'8" wide and about that thick, 2 volumes. I've actually seen a first edition. I was going around this big house in Norfolk, and we're going round and the guide is there. I said, "Is that a first edition?" "Yes." I said, "I've written about that, I've talked about that, can I touch it?" She went, "Oh, let me think." "No, you can't." By which time I had. Yeah. And she knew that, and I just said, "Thank you," and she went, just like that. Right. So his book cost £4.10. Doesn't sound a lot, but that in today's money is roughly £800. He sold 6,000 copies, and the abridged version, tens of thousands, year after year after year. It was a bestseller because we've now got a booming population with the middle classes, because we've got the industrial and agrarian revolution going on, and so you've got the mill owners and the like, and they want to send their kids to public schools and everything else. So there is a big goal. In 1762, Robert Louth came out with a short introduction to English grammar. Now he was sold on Latin, so it was 1 page Latin, 1 page English. 1 page Latin, all the way through. It's a very, very heavy read, but later on there was an abridged version, and that was used in schools, so it's public and private schools up until state education, then state education as well up until the 1960s and 70s. So lots of you would have been taught grammar as per Robert Louth. Now he applied Latin principles to a Germanic tongue. He was the one that said a preposition as a word you cannot end a sentence with. Right. But yes, you can in English. Right? He was the one and said that you cannot split an infinitive. Yes, you can, because it's more accurate to split an infinitive. I want you to turn the dial slowly. By which time you've said slowly, you've turned it too far. So I want you to slowly turn the dial. I want you to add the ingredients in gradually. But by the time I've said that, you've put too much in. So therefore I want you to gradually put them in. So yes, it is okay to, and modern grammarians are saying we can split the infinitive and we can end a sentence with a preposition. Thomas Sheridan, same year as Robert Louth, came out with a book on a course of lectures of elocution. So it was on rhetoric and pronunciation. 4 public schools, Eton, Harrow, Westminster and Winchester, got together with those 3 books and produced public school pronunciation. And they changed some spellings. They tried to Latinise it a bit to make it more classical, and they changed pronunciation and the like. It was then accepted by Oxford and Cambridge University, and that was the start of Standard English. Although unofficial, it was the start of Standard English. And throughout the 1800s, public and private schools adopted that. They really did. The Americans were so incensed with this public school pronunciation, PSP, and endorsed the notion that this new form of English was created by gentlemen, for gentlemen, to distinguish them from the laborious working classes. I know. Now in 1785, Webster's dictionary was published to protest against PSP. So they came out in protest. And it was to keep English English rather than this new way of speaking it. And in fact, the Americans have held on to more Elizabethan English than we have. Awesome. That's not an American word that's come over. That went over with the Bible when the Puritans went over to America. So awesome. Queen Elizabeth I would have used awesome, and she would have gone out in the fall. Not the autumn, she would have gone out in the fall. And she would have said, I've gotten this and I've gotten that. The only time we've gotten something is when we've forgotten or begotten. We're also talking about empire building and colonialism. God. So during the 1800s, we went around the world, sticking a Union flag wherever we could. And we've taken thousands and thousands and thousands of words from the foreign climes, like I've said to you. Right, the one that I like is also what we've taken. I must tell you these little ones, I think. As from Ireland, Wales and Scotland. So these are some of the Brythonic words that we've kept in our language. Banshee, bard, or the Celtic words rather than just, right, Banshee, bard, bog, brogues, caber, ceilidh, clan, coracle, crag, Eisteddfod, hooligan, kerfuffle, trousers, whiskey, smithereens. And one of the English political parties, they have taken on an Irish word for their name, and it is, the Irish word was Tory, which is the Tory party, and Tory is Irish Gaelic for robber bandit. I kept a straight face then. I can because I'm Suffolk, because I didn't want to show any political allegiance to either side. I didn't want to upset anybody. The agrarian and the industrial revolution. So we've added thousands of more words into the English language. All right, we've taken Italian, Latin and Greek type words and we've adopted it, and we've come out words with like combustion engine, hydraulic power, electric motor, lawnmower, piston, steamboats, telegraph poles, railway, telephone, stethoscope, railway lines, typist, steam power, vacuum pump, safety lamp. So more and more words are now coming into the English language. We're now into the modern day. So we've got those three people who've produced those 3 books, and we've produced public school pronunciation. But now we're going to come into the 20th century. And Daniel Jones in 1917, he wrote a book on English Pronouncing Dictionary. Wasn't meaning of words, wasn't the derivation of words, it was words and their pronunciation. And I have a quotation here, so I shall quote. As spoken, by the well-educated middle and upper classes whose menfolk had attended Cambridge and Oxford universities, having been previously educated at schools like Harrow, Eton, Westminster and Winchester, the great public boarding schools. That was the English Pronouncing Dictionary, and it proved very, very popular. So much so that it was adopted by the BBC in the early days. And in the 1920s, he sat on the first committee to decide how presenters and newsreaders, what English language they should have. And he came out with a book on BBC pronunciation in 1928. And 3 years later came out the revised edition, and in that revised edition it says that garage can now rhyme with marriage and carriage. So it's okay to say garage for those that tell you otherwise. So we've now got the standards at the BBC, and it's now being called Received Pronunciation and BBC English. Members of the royal family, they received PSP, and then all of a sudden we're now starting to get Christmas messages by the King. And then during the wartime, his wartime speeches. So it became known as King's English. Then we had the Queen, and it was known as Queen's English, and now we're back to King's English. And it became rather a bit of an elitist factor. It really was elitist to be able to speak this public school pronunciation or received pronunciation. So much so that in the 1940s, the BBC did something rather patriotic. This is during the war. They decided to have a newsreader with a Yorkshire accent, because they knew that the Germans could copy public school pronunciation or received pronunciation, and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But if they were trying to do a Yorkshire accent, we would know that that was a German trying to do a Yorkshire accent. And they employed Wilfrid Pickles. As, yes, there was public outroar. Lord Beaverbrook, who was head of the Sunday Express and the Daily Express, letters came pouring in by the hundreds and thousands, telephone calls and the like. So much so that the BBC dropped Wilfrid Pickles as a newsreader. But it was the BBC themselves that actually started to break down the elitism, because they started to employ people with accents. Now, this is when I was a boy or I was a teenager. We had lovely one, Peter O'Sullivan, the Irishman who did the racing commentary. Bill McLaren, Scotland, wonderful, wonderful rugby union commentator. And I shall always remember, and he was very unbiased. It didn't matter whether Scotland was playing or not. He really was unbiased and gave good worth to the other side as well. He was really unbiased. But I remember him once when Scotland went through and scored a try, and he came out with, "It was 16 stone of prime Scottish beef on the hoof." They'll be celebrating in Melrose tonight. That's right. Then you had Eddie Waring from Yorkshire in the Rugby League with his up and under and going for an early bath. Yes, that's right. And then John Haylock from Hampshire. Oh, yes. And I bunked off school to go around the back of the gymnasium, right, to listen to the test match on my transistor. Now, so I know John Haylock said this because the headmaster, unbeknownst to me, was going around doing his tour with his cape, with his cane up his sleeve, and heard me laugh. Came round, and sure enough, this cost me 2 whacks the cane, because this is what John Haylock said. "The New Zealand wicket-keeper, legs astride, waiting for a tickle." I think I've got to explain what a tickle is here. Right. Well, yes. The lady. No. So therefore, your reaction, I thought you thought otherwise. But so when the ball just touches the bat and goes through to the wicket, that's called a tickle. And right, okay, we got there. Right. And so we've started to take words from the television, like we did with the Industrial Revolution. What's on the box? Right, because it used to be a box, right? Radio, back to square one. So on the radio, be listening to a football match. Radio Times came out with the football pitch into squares. So you had one half and the other half. So the forward line would be in squares, something like 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you'd go back, and the goalkeeper was in square one. So therefore, Charlton in square 3. So you could have the chart in front of you, you're listening, and then they passed it back to the goalkeeper, back to square 1. So that's where we get the phrase back to square 1. I've got the dreaded lurgy. Where did we get that from? Who said that? Yes. Not many people. Get a round of applause for this gentleman. He's got it. That's right. Yes. It was, I got the dreaded lurgy. And then people would say, I can't come into work today, I've got the lurgy. And lurgy eventually became a word acceptable and into the Oxford English Dictionary. Right? We've got telly. You're going to watch the telly. Television is another word. Sitcom. Sci-fi. So the English language is still evolving because we have never ever had that strict straitjacket going on there to stop it. We've also messed around with the English language as well. We've had what we call dialectal intrusions. We've added letters in. So if I give you a message to go next door, that should make you a messenger. But we add an N in to make it easier to say and it becomes messenger. We're now on board boat and we're all on passage to India. So that should make us passengers. But we put an N in to make it passenger. And that lovely song at night, the Nightgale, right? We add an N in to make it nightingale because it's easier to say. So we've added letters in, right? And with surnames, Tom's son becomes Thompson because it's easy to, and dreamt. We put the P in to make it easier to say. So, the lad who's learning Swedish. What have I just written on that board?
Soaring wood.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you. Sir, what have I written on that board?
Soaring wood.
Now we've got a Scots lady there.
Sewing wood.
See what you added an R in. Soaring wood. There's not an R in soaring. Right, but the Scots lady, sawing. Now if we went back to the 1700s and said soaring, we would have found that that would have been in there and we'd have spelled soaring. And gnawing a bone. There's not an R in gnawing. And drawing. There's not 2 R's in drawing, it's just 1 R in drawing. So we've added letters in. And some of the letters that we've transposed, right? So, because we used to say, now that is like a petticoat, like a pinafore. But because we used to say an apron, we took the N off napron and we made it an apron. And the viper, we took the N off nadder and we made it an adder. And Norwich, we took the N off because we used to say an orange and we made it an orange. And if you look in the dictionary, those 3 words, apron, adder and orange, you'll see originally it had an N in the front. But the other way also happened, right? So if I called you, I don't want to be, if I called you Jock because you're Scottish, right, that would be an nickname. Nickname is Middle English for another name. But because we used to say a nickname, we took the N off Anne and then made it a nickname. Right, so therefore we've messed about with it, we really have. And the M's and N's, like I've said, we've messed them around too. So we have messed around with the English language. And eventually it's become standard and accepted. But we've still got dialects. And I quote from the Cambridge Encyclopedia English Language. And the lady that unfortunately, the lady had the red hat on, came up and apologised. She said because the car parked and we're going to run out of time. She was in school in Northamptonshire and she looked at her school diary before she came here because she'd been to one of my previous talks and she said, today we had so-and-so and so-and-so teaching us the proper way to speak English. Right. But now we've got away from this, and this is from the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language. Disparagement of regional speech readily transmutes into disparagement of the speakers. The study of regional linguistic variation has more to offer than purely descriptive interest. The more we know about regional variation and the change in the use of English, the more we will come to appreciate the striking individuality of each of the varieties which we call dialect. An essential first step is to replace the notion that a regional variety is only a dialect because it lacks the prestige of the standard language, with the realisation that every dialect is a source of great linguistic complexity and potential. So therefore, yes, we do need standard English so we can listen to newsreaders and the like, and when a doctor writes out a prescription, yeah, we need to have a proper standard, but also we need to keep our dialects as well, because dialects go back to the 5th century. Standard English goes back to the late 1700s, and accents and dialects are rich with our heritage, so we must keep them alive. So I've talked about dialects. I'm now going to give you a dialect tour of the British Isles, showing how a deaf person can lip read and tell you what dialect you have. And I knew a deaf bloke. Well, originally he wasn't. Up until the age of 18 he had acute hearing, and there was an explosion in the workshop, burst eardrums, can't wear hearing aids like I do, and he learned how to lip read. He lived in a world of silence, so he learned how to lip read. And if you have a dialect, he'll tell you where you come from. So I'm going to start off with Scotland, because that's what he did. And so we're in the Glasgow area and the hinterland of Glasgow. So it's teeth on top of one another, the mouth drops down at the side, and the noise comes from behind the teeth. They also roll their R's, and to do that the tongue must be very, very close to the roof of your mouth. Right. And they find it very difficult to pronounce the double L in the middle of a word, because they can't get the tongue at the right angle to hit the roof of your mouth, and it ends up a W. So it's brilliant. You drop it down at the side there. It's William and brilliant. But if you just open that way, it's Edinburgh, and you can now pronounce the double L. Go across to Northern Ireland, they drop the top set in front of the bottom set, mouth drops down at the side, noise from behind the teeth, and they push the bottom lip out. To get their sure sound in Ireland, put the top set in front of the bottom set, push. You've got to do that. It's a very lilting dialect, but it can be very aggressive. Ian Paisley would have read it at the Shopman list, and that would have been aggressive. You can take your hands away. All right. 2 pounds of Brussels sprouts. Thank you. You then go to the Republic of Ireland, and they all talk through a h sound. It's a constant h. All the time they're talking through a h sound. And in the Irish Gaelic, you don't put your tongue in between your teeth like we do with mother, brother and through. The tongue stays behind the teeth. So the hard th becomes a d. So it's mother, father. But the soft th, they pronounce both the t and the h. So healthy becomes healthy, and filthy becomes filthy. And I did a tour of South West Ireland, West Cork, Kerry and Clare, and there they move around. Little short, sharp phrases, head goes up in the air, head goes down. Right? I saw an advertisement in the paper. The police was coming round the corner, but all the time they're talking through a sound. You go to Dublin and they talk slightly out the side of the mouth. Where a north side or a south side, they're talking slightly out the side of the mouth. Go across to Liverpool, teeth on top of one another, noise from the back of the throat, travels to the nose and the mouth goes to one side. And Mr. Jewell, who used to look after Ipswich Town, he was a Liverpudlian. He wouldn't say full back, that's full back. Full back, it's nasal, goes through the nose. And if he's going to talk about the blue shirt of Ipswich, it's blue shirt. But if you're a woolly back who lives on the outskirts of Liverpool, it's blue shirt. Still nasal, still goes through the nose, but the mouth doesn't go to one side. So therefore, as soon as you go back into Liverpool, the mouth goes to one side, and that's why you get dirty Gertie from number 30. You then go to the Midlands, and the Midlands speak from the roof of the mouth and make a circle with the lips. So if you're Coventry, Wolverhampton, Birmingham or Black Country, right, the noise comes from the roof of the mouth and make a circle with the lips. Now here we'll fine tune it, watch how people speak first, you see. You then go to Yorkshire. And Yorkshire, they keep their jaw very, very stiff. So if you're watching Geoffrey Boycott, he's talking with jaw, all right, stiff as that. You go to the northeast, the jaw stays still, noise from the back of the throat and the head goes up slightly. And Ruth and I, my partner, we went to Northumbria for a holiday. We went to a place called Alnwick, where the castle is, where they filmed Harry Potter. This actually didn't happen in the castle in Alnwick, this happened in a cafe in Alnwick, and I'm rather glad it did, because I now call this an anecdote. So we've gone up to the lady behind the counter and we've ordered up a round of sandwiches each and a pot of tea for two. And we've sat down and we finished them, and I say to Ruth, I'm going to go and pay the bill. So I walked up and she say, what would you like, pet? I said, I want to pay, please. She says, why, aye? What sort? He was a bit slow on that one. I said, what do you mean, what sort? She says, well, we got blackberry and apple pie and just plain apple. So I said, no, I don't want a pie, I want a pie. Why, aye? Blackberry and apple or just plain apple? I said, no, I want to pay the bill. She went, oh, you want a pear? So I said, why, aye, pet, I want a pear. She said, why didn't you say it? I said, I did. By which time Ruth was crying with laughter. I said, you go to Lancashire and they curl their tongue. Right, and so if you're a Bolton, Blackburn or Burnley, you're curling your tongue and you're originating here. You then go to South Wales, teeth on top of one another, big broad grin, very easy, do a South Rush accent, teeth together, keep on smiling. Do you not? I've had a bloody awful day today, they keep on smiling. Even when we lost to England at rugby. I said, we then go to the West Country, right, and I said, they resonate down here. Now, if you resonate down here, you can't pronounce the letter H down here. Right, now Cornish will make a circle with the lips, so it's Cornish. You then put your teeth together and you're now in Somerset. So you've gone from Cornish to Somerset. And then, if we go along a little bit further, right, we're now going to resonate just behind, and we come to John Arlott, the New Zealand wicket keeper. So you're now resonating just above the Adam's apple. Then you get to about there, and we're now in the Vale of Oxford and Pam Ayres. And Ruth and I went and saw Pam Ayres at Clacton doing a one-woman show, and she had the cheek to tell Essex people that the Ugly Sisters came from Fordham in Essex, and gave them a little limerick to go alongside it. Now I am resonating there. I can't get as high as her, but I can do the accent. The Ugly Sisters, they came from Fordham. Not down here, the Ugly Sisters came from Fordham, and not there, the ugly, because you got the rhotic R, but it's too rhotic. If you're too far forward, you haven't got the rhotic R at all, so you must resonate just there. The Ugly Sisters, they came from Fordham. They went for a walk due to boredom, and on the way back they met a sex maniac, and he totally ignored them. We now come to the front of the mouth, and we're now in East Anglia. Now, when I was teaching the actors a Suffolk accent on the Netflix film The Dig, I had them out there, and I had done that dialect tour to show how important it was to get the mouth movements right. So I said, right, now I've done my little tour, I want you, the actors, to tell me, by looking at me, I want you to tell me what is the difference between the Suffolk accent and Norfolk accent. Right? I said, there's nothing wrong with the Norfolk accent, but where Basil Brown came from was just short of the Norfolk border, but it was a very strong Suffolk accent. So you need to know the difference between the two, so you don't slip into a Norfolk accent when you should stay in England. Now, because I had them out quite wide, I then had to do it so they could see, and so just the same like today, and so you can see. So this is what I'm showing the actors, right? Suffolk, would you like a cup of tea, do you? It's over here. Norfolk, would you like a cup of tea there? That's over here. And I turned, would you like a cup of tea, do you? That's over here. And would you like a cup of tea there? That's over here. I said to the actors, I said, did any of you see the difference? This actor said, I did. I said, what's the difference then? People from Suffolk turn to the right when they talk. So Suffolk people, it's the hardest accent they'd ever tried to do, because we resonate right at the front of the mouth and we don't open the mouth very wide, and we push our lips out when we speak. So it's hear and do ya. Don't open it right. We now come to East London, London, and wherever you go, the largest is the fastest. Paris is the fastest French dialect. Oslo is the fastest Norwegian, New York is the fastest American, Ipswich is the fastest Suffolk dialect, Norwich is the fastest Norfolk dialect. It don't matter where you go. And London is no exception, especially East London. East London is the fastest English-speaking dialect anywhere where English is spoken. It's faster than any Australian, any American, any South African. It is the fastest English-speaking dialect. But not only that, they open their mouth wider than any other English-speaking dialect. So it's fair to say, because they talk so fast and open their mouth so wide, they don't have time to shut it. To make a t sound, you've actually got to have teeth together. They can't do that. So it's, but I better leave it out. You're having a bird bath, aren't you? They also talk so fast, they don't have time to put their tongue in between their teeth like we do with mother, brother and through. That's mother, brother, through. They also can't pronounce the L on the end of words because the tongue isn't in the right place. So it's a W, so it's tell, and del, and lil. Right. So yeah. We then start putting some of these accents together. There was a mass migration from Suffolk to Australia in the 1820s, 30s, 40s and 50s. Adverts in the Suffolk Chronicle for farmers, farm labourers, dairymaids, milkmaids, shepherds, sheep shearers, the lot. And Suffolk farming folk in their tens of thousands and tens of thousands went to Australia, including Charles Bradman, the grandfather of Sir Donald Bradman from Withersfield, not Wethersfield, Withersfield just outside Haverhill. They were mainly blokes. So therefore they wanted women as well. So they advertised for women aged between 15 and 30 because these were going to be the child bearers and they wanted to populate the colony and if accepted by the committee, free passage to Australia. That's why lots of Suffolk dialect words in the Australian dialect. Now you put in the prison ships, the East London prison ships and the Suffolk prison ships more than the rest of the country put together. So there's a bit of an influence from East London. So therefore, and I was telling these actors, if you start to sound a little bit Australian, then Suffolk people will know you're trying to do a Suffolk accent. Because all I have to do, now I don't open my mouth wide enough to say day. It's D, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now I'm going to try and say that with my mouth getting wider and wider and wider. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and all I'm doing is a Suffolk accent with my mouth wide open. So if you actors start sounding Australian, then you'll know that you're trying to do a Suffolk accent, all right? And they went, yes, Mr. Haylock, yes, Mr. Haylock, yes. And when you look, accents are changing all the time. It means it's alive. You can't keep them still because then they'll die. Like Latin is no longer a living language. Yes, it's used in law, yes, it's used in music, but not as a living language because it had a straitjacket on it. Ancient Greek is the same. But you must let a language evolve, right? We saw that with the Queen, with the way that she spoke at the beginning of her reign to the end of her reign. And so therefore we must allow it to evolve. It's still evolving, thank goodness. Now that East London accent that I did for you, that was perhaps when I was a boy, right? Not anymore, because we've had Windrush, because we've had lots of people coming in from around the world. The black kids and the white kids are now mixing in together, and the dialect of East London is now more of West Indian, and they even got to go. But if you then go into the places where East London went, places like Harlow, places like Great Cornard and Haverhill, you will hear the 1950s, 60s accent of East London, and they still talk like that in Cornard. I can tell because I live there and I hear it every day. Right. So therefore accents are changing and moving all the time. With the slave trade, we first of all grounded up poor people and sent them over as slaves or enslaved to the Carolinas and the Virginias and the West India and the like. That didn't work, so we went over to Ireland and we rounded up a few Irish people and we took them over. This is before we went to Africa and rounded up lots of unfortunate black people to people. So Irish, and if you go to Jamaica especially, you can still hear the Irish influence in that accent of Jamaica. You won't hear me borrowing any homesick tears if I don't to Jamaica for 1,000 years. They're talking through the her sound, so you can hear that big Irish influence there. And wherever you go, where English is spoken, you can hear the influences there. The Rhotic R is disappearing. It's gradually just going over to the west, and we've lost it. So I fought a battle in a fort. Well, that should be fort. Fought a battle in the fort, and therefore I saw as in look, but this is sore and painful, but sore and painful, so we're losing. And tuna the fish, and tuner the piano tuner, otherwise you can have a piano fish, but that ain't right, is it? And court as in catch, but in a tennis court, not a tennis court. So we're losing that Rhotic R, we really are. Some of the changes in words as we've gone through. Gay used to be happy and jolly. Now it means homosexual, right? Awful, that meant full of awe and wonderment. but now it means it's terrible. Parboil, that meant to boil thoroughly, comes from the French parbouiller, but now it means to part boil. Silly, that meant holy and blessed, comes from Seely, right? But now it means silly, who someone's daft. Naughty, that didn't mean someone who was, you know, bad behaved or something. That was somebody who had naught, was poor and destitute. They had naught, and so naught has gone from being poor to being sort of meat. That just meant solid food, as in meat and drink. Now it means that which has flesh. And fizzle was to slowly and quietly emit flatulence. You know, if something fizzles out now, but then fizzle, and I've got a quote from 1534. It's a Prayseed quote. The old trot so fizzle that she stunk like 100 devils, which put the poor fox ill at ease, for he knew not how to escape the unsavoury perfume from this old woman's postern blasts. We've got words with different pronunciations that mean the same. Controversy, or is it controversy? Either, neither, neither. Urine, urine. Migraine, migraine. Privacy or privacy. Hurricane, hurricane. Harassment, harassment. Garage, that's got three. Garage, garage and garage. Lichen, you say lichen, I say lichen. Let's call the whole thing moss. Because we've taken words from around the world, we have ended up with 600,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. 600,000 words. That's twice as many as the next country down. Twice as many. It also means that we have 10 ways of saying this, 10 ways of saying that. It means our authors and playwrights can have plots and subplots. They can have puns. They can have double entendres. We can have word games. We can have cryptic crosswords. We can have countdown. You know, we can play with our words. We really can. And Chaucer, Dickens, Agatha Christie, the Bronte sisters, P.G. Wodehouse, Jane Austen, they've been translated around the world. No other country can boast that. Our great authors and playwrights have been translated around the world. And people in their millions come to the English stage. Ruth and I, we went to see The Lion King in London. Thousands in the audience. Not just English speaking from England, they came from around the world. And not just from English speaking parts, they were from South America, they were from China, they were from Japan, they're from Italy, they're from around the world. And we should be so proud of our English language because we've never ever had a straitjacket. Are there any questions, please? I've got one for the audience before you ask me one. 600,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. If you did a pie chart with all the words we've taken from around the world, Anglo-Saxon would be something like about 10% of that 600,000 words. The question I'm now going to ask you, the 100 most common words in the English language today, how many do you think are based from Old English?
None.
Oh. Oh. Come on, give me a number.
Go the other way, 80.
Higher.
100. Yeah.
You're nearest. Yes. 96 words are from Old English. Words like the, to, that, for, with, at, from, by, what, when, there, which, there. The four from Norman French are use, number, people and oil. All the rest. Now, because these are the words, these are the link words, and because that structure is so simple, that's why it's so strong. And that's why we can keep on taking words from around the world and keeping that adding in to that English structure. That is the same structure that was at Hastings, Agincourt, Juna, and now. As I said in my little quote, yesterday that weather was good. Today storm up Arras, mid rain and hail shower. We hidden under thy mainway. You see the structure is there and it still is today. I shall like to end up with a lovely poem showing you how rich this English language is of ours. Right. I'm going to look at one word, and that one word has only 2 letters. And it just shows you how rich our English language is. This 2-letter word in English has more meanings than any other 2-letter word. It is listed in the dictionary as either an adverb, preposition, adjective, noun or verb. It's easy to understand up, meaning towards the sky or on top of a hill, but why in the morning do we wake up? At a meeting, why does a topic come up, and why do we speak up, and why are officers up for election, and why is it up to the secretary to write up the report? We call up our friends, brighten up a room, polish up the silver, warm up the leftovers, clean up the kitchen and fix up the old car. We lock up the shop at night, but we open up in the morning. At other times, up has real special meanings. People stir up trouble, line up for tickets, work up in appetite and think up excuses. To be dressed is one thing, but to be dressed up is special. A drain must be opened up because it's clogged up. We seem to be pretty mixed up about up. To be knowledgeable about the proper uses of up, look up the word up in the dictionary. In a desk-sized dictionary, you'll take up almost a quarter of a page and can add up to about 30 definitions. But if you're up for it, you might try building up a list of the many uses of up. It's up to you, it'll take up a lot of your time, but if you don't give up, you might wind up with up to 100 or more. When it threatens to rain, we say it's clouding up. When the sun comes out, we say it's clearing up. When it rains, the earth soaks it up. But when it doesn't rain for a while, things dry up. If we tell a joke, we hope you crack up. When we mess things up, that could be a mess up, or even a lash up, or even far worse. And when we get angry, up yours. One could go on and on about up, but it's nearly time for me to shut up. But one thing I must flag up before I pack up: why do we chop a tree down and then chop it up? And on that note, my time is up and time for me to wrap up. Thank you kindly. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you kindly.